What's going on, Badger Nation? Join me as I go for a walk in the blistering, cold ice storm that's happening now in the state of Texas, here in the USA. And welcome to Inside the Badger Den. This is a bonus episode where I discuss what it's like inside the Badger Den. Our normal programming every week is still going to happen. This is a bonus episode where really I'm just trying to gather my thoughts and observations about the Amazon advertising industry from the perspective of a company that oversees. I just found out this number for the first time. It's a lot bigger than I thought it was. It's $300 million in Amazon advertising spend per year flows through our system. Pretty neat. So the first thing that I wanted to mention as I sort of look back and reflect over the month of January is some of the content pieces that we actually put together. You know, the content in January was a little experiment. Basically what I did was in like the middle of last year, I asked some of the Amazon PPC managers that work here at AdBadger, hey, let's do an experiment. Go find something that's an issue in a particular Amazon account. And then I want to follow along with whatever we think the fix will be. And, you know, we audit a lot of accounts here at AdBadger, so we had a healthy database of things to tap into. And we basically identified three main problems. The first was a particular campaign that had way too many keywords. It had about 6,000 keywords. And basically, we followed along with that product's performance as it was split out into many separate campaigns. So if you want to hear about that, that was, I think, one of my most interesting ones that I've ever done, where we actually said, okay, let's go beyond the theory. Let's talk about what we are going to do, why we're going to do it. And then let's go check back in months later to get a recap and conclusion. So we did that. I thought that was really cool. We released both of those episodes in January. The second was an experiment of really what can happen when you add additional campaign types to a product that only has sort of the standard sponsored products, which, by the way, if you do nothing else today from listening to this episode, do that. Meaning, in this experiment, we basically took a product that was humming along with, you know, the normal sponsored product breakout, and then literally all we did was add sponsored brands, sponsored display, you know, adding a variety of those things. Easy value add. I still think this is the easiest way to scale. A lot of times I'll look at accounts and, you know, they're like 80% of their ad spend is sponsored products. And it's like, oh, go and get the best products with the best keywords, with the best ASIN targets, and just literally duplicate that over to sponsored brands, sponsored brand video, launch some sponsored display along the same lines. All of those things. Just take what is already working and just expand on it. You don't even need to do any research. You already know it's working from your sponsored products. Just put it in a sponsored brand, so on and so forth. So that is still today in 2023, I think one of the easiest ways to grow an account. So if you're not doing this, I think you can easily boost your account maybe 20% in volume just by doing something like that. Again, not doing anything different that you're not already doing, just sort of taking the exact same keywords from your sponsored product. Go smack them over there in sponsored brand. I love it. The third was a BSR experiment. And out of the three that we did over the course of January, this was the one that was the hardest. But I think this is a really good one because most of PPC and most of Amazon marketing is actually give and take, trial and error. A lot of it is highs and lows. And I think this was a little bit of a low, but I think it's worth listening to because it's real life. Most companies do not see every single month be better than the previous month in perpetuity. There are times when, you know, your performance goes up and there's times when your performance goes down. I mean, even if you do nothing inside a particular campaign, change no bids, change no budgets, add no keywords, take none away, you know, your performance will ebb and flow ever so slightly based off market demands and such. With BSR is an interesting one because, you know, BSR is you versus other people. So it's not so much market ebbs and flows. It's sort of more competitor ebb and flows. This was a really interesting case. Someone had top BSR, they lost top BSR and had a heck of a time trying to get it back. So talking a little bit about the strategy to sort of push it back in place was really interesting. Talking about, you know, why it was, and theoretically sometimes it's a game of margins. And I thought that was a really interesting episode with some different concepts that we haven't talked about before on the show. So those are some things that I was thinking about in January. I hope you enjoyed that content. I really, really liked it. So hopefully you got a chance to sort of expand your perspective and level up your skills. I know I did. We also updated, I was really proud of this. We've been podcasting now for over 220 episodes or more, and it's really hard to keep track of all that info. So we put together the Badger Guide to Amazon PPC, and I absolutely love it. There's 150 rows in there, which catalog and organize all of our content. It's got all the freebies in there. So I'm really stoked on it. We've been putting it in the description of every podcast episode, which is really nice. It's one of my favorite resources we've ever made. And I think it'll be the favorite resource for a while, because if we create something else, we're just going to smack it on there too. Keep it organized. And as we sort of wrap up January, we are finishing up a multi-month app project with our software. And if you use the AdBadger tool, or you use somebody else's tool, or you use no tool at all, maybe you're using bulk files, or maybe you are just working right in the interface, regardless of what it is that you use, you spend a lot of time using that tool. And even if it's the default interface, you're technically not using a third-party tool, but you're using that tool. I think one interesting thing is like a speed change of like 10% is gigantic, and some parts of our tool were increased by like 25, 50, 100%. It's a really ambitious goal to try to load, potentially 50,000 products multiplied by 30 columns of data. So it's really ambitious what we try to do inside AdBadger. And if you've ever used, Google Sheets, that chugs along a little slowly too sometimes. So I was really proud of all the improvements that we made in the sort of the last few months. This isn't really a January update. Even today, as I record this, which is a couple days into February, it feels like a different app. Other things that I'm thinking about in terms of Amazon PPC strategy are duplicates. I thought about duplicates. This is one of these things that people used to talk about, I think, more. However, today, I think they still wonder about it, but I don't think they've ever gotten a good answer on it. So I did a little work talking about duplicates, thinking about duplicates, and basically I'll define what I mean by duplicate. Let's say you have campaign A and campaign B, and you have, the same product. So even if you only have one product, or maybe you have different products, doesn't matter. But basically imagine if the same term is in campaign A and campaign B. And, potentially these are two auto campaigns, or potentially this is an auto campaign and a broad match campaign, or an exact campaign. And basically it's triggering the same term. Basically one thing I wanted to do was build a duplicate hunter, which basically goes out and hunts and finds, it's Badger. So I couldn't call it a duplicate finder. I had to call it a duplicate hunter because Badgers. And imagine you had a really simple tool to basically cross-find that across sponsored products, across sponsored brands, across sponsored display, and just combined it from all three campaign types. That way, a cool thing, two cool things. The first is you can find amazing search terms that you should multiply to other ad types. So imagine you run this report and you find an amazing term in sponsored brands, but you look at it and you're like, hey, wait a second, this is not appearing in sponsored products. I should add that over there. So again, the same concept that I mentioned before that was really helpful for that scaling project where, how do you grow an account? Well, it's like you take your best keywords and you just put those into other ad types and make sure you have that sort of 3 campaign type visibility. So this is really going to help with that, help you expand it. And it can also help you do the inverse, meaning find terms that you do not want duplicated among many places. So let's say in campaign A, that search term has a 10% ACoS, but in campaign B has a 50% ACoS. You might be able to look at that and make some adjustments and say, hey, I only want this to appear in campaign A. And by negating it in campaign B, you can funnel more of that over to campaign A. So you can make decisions like that. So duplicates, I think it's an underrated. I think it's one of the most underrated things that someone can consider. And I'm not saying that all duplicates are good, and I'm not saying that all duplicates are bad, but the act of deciding and looking at your duplicates and saying, this is a good duplicate, I'm going to keep it, or this is a great term, I need to duplicate it, or this is a bad duplicate, it shouldn't be in campaign B, it should only be in campaign A. I love that level of optimization, and I think it's really helpful in a time where total ACOSs are going up. It's really cool to be able to say, let's put our best foot forward. Let's go with the lowest ACOSs possible. Let's go with the things that maximize value the most. Other huge things that happened in January. Yeah, broad match. If you are, whoever you are, doesn't matter what you're doing, go look at your broad match keywords for sponsored products. They're very likely to be behaving massively different than they did before. I did a bunch of content. I did a bunch of research in it, and we'll be coming out with a full episode on the broad match changes in February, I believe. But for right now, go look at how it's behaving. Basically, it's switched back to behaving like true broad instead of modified broad like it was. If those terms don't mean anything to you, just hang tight. We got more content for you. But for right now, just be sure you go look at your search term report. So those are a couple of the big Amazon PPC trends, underrated optimizations, things that I'm thinking, things that I'm doing, things that I'm focused on. And we covered 3 separate problems. We covered campaign with too many keywords. We covered scaling an account by multiplying the campaign types. We talked about BSRs and what to do with them, how to think about them, how to work them in strategically. Talked about duplicate keywords, talked about broad match keywords. January was a busy month. So thank you for joining me on this wintry walk. And if you look up the news from Austin, you'll notice that just winter storm had a whole bunch of icy trees, icy oak trees. That was the deal. Oak trees, very, very heavy. Their tree limbs normally grow almost like parallel to the floor sometimes, parallel to the ground, the outdoor floor, also known as the ground. And they fall over when it gets really icy. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me on this walk. And I will see you next week here in the PPC Den podcast. This is Michael Erickson Facchin from Advertisers. Badger out.